All right, we're back.
So no intro or anything?
Sorry, no, we didn't do
Okay.
it. We were too busy doing everything else. We're just doing a really cute little coming back live.
All right, because I am looking on YouTube. Once I see my face on there, I will start, but I still don't see anything. I still see that it's waiting.
Well, you need to go to a refresh and go back to the GRM page. It won't be the same place.
Okay, hold on a second, because if I don't see it, I'm really, really sorry. I know this is not very professional, but let me see if I can get this going, because if I don't see anything, it's really kind of strange.
You just got to go to the GRM YouTube page.
Okay, I went back to the page.
Should see
and
something
it says
live now.
Video unavailable. Okay, let's see. Oh my goodness!
Email.
Live. Okay. Let's see here. So I'm on YouTube.
That's so weird. It's still not.
How to Love the Unlovable.
No, I don't know
Christian
what's
Guide to
going
Difficult
on.
People.
This is having a hard crash out today. I think we might just have to stick with the ones that we have.
Okay, we're not going to do YouTube?
Yeah, we'll just go ahead and continue with the other people on our other platforms today. I think we might need to have to reset the whole computer today.
All right.
Well, welcome back.
Well, welcome everybody on Facebook, and sorry to those of you on YouTube, even though you can't hear me say sorry to you.
We'll post the video afterwards.
All right, so let's start from here. Okay, this is Back to the Father. Thanks so much for joining me. And as I mentioned, this is a program where we talk about the teachings of St. Thomas Aquinas and the Summa Theologia. And today, it's the infinity of God. It's pantheism. It is existentialism, and it is idealism. I know those are like long words and you may not have a lot of familiarity with them, but once I tell you some about these and some of the adherents of these different philosophies, you might find that they're relatively common in our culture today. In fact, we'll get to pantheism here first. So as I was mentioning a moment ago, we had to take a little bit of a break there to see if we could get our YouTube channel working again. But this all has to do with the relationship between God and the human being and the created world. Okay, we got the created world out there. We got all the stuff in the world. We got us made to the image and likeness of God. And then we've got God. Okay, so what is the interaction? What is the interaction between these three things? And that's what these all have to do with. And I've often thought that it would be kind of fun to do what I call existential radio. Okay, and then maybe by the end of this program, you'll see what I'm talking about this. Most of the time on radio, we're talking about things in the future or things in the past. We're talking about, hey, let's talk about Vatican II. Let's talk about the history of the Catholic Church, or hey, we got this event coming up, or talking earlier today to the D'Ambrosios about a movie that's coming out. So it's always like something in the future or something in the past. But existential radio would be like in the moment. What's happening right now from the perspective of us who are living in this moment, and that has to do with existentialism. Okay, so let me go to the first slide and talk a little bit about what's called pantheism. And pantheism, I have the definition of it up here, and I will share that with you. It's the belief that the universe and God are essentially one and the same. Okay, so that would mean that everything is God. Now, you might say, that sounds ridiculous. That sounds like nobody would believe that, right? That, this iPhone that I have in front of me, or Sissel, or this pad of paper is God. But this is actually a relatively common philosophy. And I'll show you that. You've heard of Stoicism, right? Stoicism is very, very common in our culture, especially with young people. I don't know, Sissel, if you've had any experience with Stoicism. A lot of people would identify as being Stoics, especially among young people. It's very popular. Well, Stoicism is a pantheistic philosophy. And so pantheism basically meaning that the God and the world are one and the same. Okay, so who are some of the popular pantheists out there? The picture that you see on your screen right now on the far left is a guy named Marcus Aurelius. And he was a Roman emperor in the 2nd century. And he is largely regarded to be an outstanding emperor. You know, if people look at somebody who wasn't corrupted by power, Marcus Aurelius typically is used as an example of somebody that really did take the common good in mind. And one of the reasons that he did this was that he was a pantheist, and he was a Stoic. He's one of the famous Stoics. And he wrote a book called The Meditations. And The Meditations is widely popular today. In fact, so even modern day philosophers will talk about the Meditations and how it influenced them. And so it's very popular. So this is not like some outdated philosophy that nobody, adheres to any longer. The very next picture that you see on this screen right now is a 17th century rationalist philosopher by the name of Baruch Spinoza. And I don't know if you've ever heard of Baruch Spinoza or not, but he is one of the very most popular philosophers of all time. He was a Jew. He was from Amsterdam and largely condemned in his own age. He was excommunicated from the Jewish faith. The Christians didn't like his philosophy. Why? Because he was a pantheist. I mean, he believed that everything was one. Okay, he believed that God and the world and the nature were all one and the same. And the reason, by the way, I have Albert Einstein on there is because Albert Einstein was a fan of Spinoza. Okay, so here's a very modern guy, Albert Einstein, considered to be one of the most intellectual people that ever lived. And he is quoted as saying, "I believe in Spinoza's God." Okay, so Albert Einstein, even though I wouldn't go so far as to say that Albert Einstein was a self-declared pantheist, he said if he were to believe in a God, it would be Spinoza's God. And he believed in the harmonious order of the universe and not so much a personal God. Okay, so the pantheists don't believe that God is personal, because how can you be personal when everything is God? There's nothing to be personal to because everything in the world is God, right? And also, you wouldn't believe that God has any kind of role in the world as far as providence or caring for people or listening to prayers or anything like that. Okay, so that would be a very pantheistic idea. And then the final picture on there is a guy who you're probably familiar with named Ralph Waldo Emerson. Okay, Emerson is a American writer, and he lived in the 19th century. He had a famous essay called Nature, and he believed that God was immanent, that God was in creation. Okay, so there really wasn't any separation between the God of the universe and the universe itself. Okay, so this is pantheism, and this is very common. And a lot of people, even though they may not consider themselves officially pantheists like Albert Einstein, it's a very, very popular philosophy in the world today. Okay, so that's pantheism. And if you are out there and you want to comment on any of this, I don't know if we have anybody that's...
By the way, we are, in fact, on YouTube.
Oh, we are on YouTube.
And
okay.
CDLAW24 says hi.
Okay.
On YouTube.
So how did we just popped up, or?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. We popped up under the wrong title. We were under yesterday's The Quest title, but we fixed that, and we're not really sure. YouTube is seeming to have, it's Friday, and I think YouTube decided to take the day off, but now we're back.
Okay, so now we're back on, and that's good because I think YouTube generally is the platform where we have the most people. We don't generally have like tons of people that are watching this program, but I know there are a few of you out there, and if you want to comment on it. So I just went over examples of pantheism, what pantheism is, and if somebody is out there, CDLA24, what a name. Did you know about pantheism? I don't know, Sissel, if you have any familiarity with it. Did you know that Albert Einstein basically was sympathetic to pantheism?
When you said it, and you mentioned that quote about him saying like, "Oh, if I was to believe in a God, it would be," I have heard that before. I don't know if I necessarily would have gone Albert Einstein. Might be a pantheist, I didn't necessarily hit my brain. The most I know about it is having to do with Hinduism and Buddhism. Mm-hmm. That's like the most I think about.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I have over there on the right of the screen Hinduism, Buddhism, and Taoism. And the reason I I mean, I don't know. Obviously, Buddha is the most famous Buddhist, but I didn't put pictures up there because I don't know who's the most famous Hindu. I know there are some famous Hindu leaders. Taoism, these are very much pantheistic religions. I'm not saying that every Hindu and every Buddhist and every Taoist is a pantheism, but there
Gandhi, I think, wasn't Gandhi?
Gandhi was a Hindu.
Yeah, that's what you think about famous ones.
I mean, that's a good example. I don't know who founded Hinduism because it goes back pretty far.
Idea.
But Eastern religions tend to be pantheistic. It tends to not make a big distinction between God and nature. And I know it's very common in Buddhism as well. So the whole point is pantheism doesn't make a distinction between God and the universe. It's all one and the same. And it seems from our Christian 21st century perspective to be kind of crazy, but it's actually pretty common. All right, so that's one thing, and so let's move on to the second little grouping here, and that is existentialism. Okay, a philosophical theory or approach which emphasizes the existence of the individual person as a free and responsible agent determining their own development through the act of the will. And this would almost, in many ways, be like the opposite of pantheism, because whereas pantheism kind of lumps it all together, where God and nature and creation are one and the same, the existentialist is very much focused on the individual. Okay, like my subjective experience, my will, who am I going to make of myself, and that kind of thing. And so it's not to say that existentialists can't be, believe in God, although most of them tend to be atheists. But it's kind of a self-centered type of detached, you might say, philosophy. And I've got some 5 pictures on here. Do you, Sissel, recognize any of these people on here? How many of the 5?
Boy, let's see. That's a good question. I was looking at this and I was like,
I didn't put their names on there for that reason. And anybody out there, if you want to try to take a guess at it. I don't know if C.D. Law.
Okay, the middle one I'm pretty sure I know is Nietzsche, right?
Friedrich Nietzsche is the middle, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
And then is the guy next to him, is that Schopenhauer?
No, you mean to the right?
To the right, yes.
Okay, to the right, that's Martin Heidegger.
I knew that, obviously.
And then
far over to the left, that guy looks is that Kierkegaard?
Yeah, good. Yeah, that's Kierkegaard. And then the one next to him, have you heard of Fyodor Dostoevsky? Crime and Punishment.
Oh, yes.
The Brothers Karamazov.
Yes, of course.
And by the way, I have never read either of those books, and I'm dying to do it. And one of my biggest regrets in life is that when I was younger, I didn't read very much. I didn't really start reading until I was probably in my 30s. And I wasted 3 decades of my life not reading anything other than what was required of me to read. And so now I'm trying to play catch up, and I've got all these books that I want to read, but I've never picked up Dostoevsky. I don't know if anybody out there has read some of these books, but they are absolute classic books. And he was an existentialist. Okay, so he would have been very much focused, especially in his writing about the kind of the individual experience.
I think I own Crime and Punishment. I'm trying to think if I remember if we read any in high school or not, any bits of it.
Yeah.
I feel like I have the opposite thing, Dave. I read a lot in my youth, and I
voluntarily
think
or forced?
Both. I mean, I didn't love. My mom was very big on every summer we had an amount of books that we had to read, and usually it was a list of like historical books specifically. But also she let us read other things. I was known to like sneak books into little crevices of our house and like hide away and read and stuff like that. So nowadays I have a harder time sitting down and reading because I'm very busy. So that is like it's the opposite.
I don't know. I don't know if I was brought up in a real reading kind of culture. I don't. There are certain kids who just are attracted to books and just reading all the time, and they're always in their room and they've got their nose in a book. And I don't remember any of my siblings ever doing that. I don't remember just a lot of books lying around. I used to read the encyclopedia. I used to love that. And at one point in my life, I read the dictionary.
Hey.
I was so fascinated with words. But anyways, getting back to these 5 pictures, you've got on the far left Soren Kierkegaard, and he is considered to be the kind of like the father of existentialism. But even having said that, he lived in the 19th century. So existentialism is a kind of a new phenomenon. And it's very much, like I said before, it's, from a very subjective, personal perspective. How do I experience the world? What is my experience of nature? And Kierkegaard was a Christian. In fact, I think of all the people, Dostoevsky, I can't say. I think he probably was a Christian as well, probably an Orthodox Christian from Russia. But Kierkegaard, his most famous book is called Fear and Trembling. And that's one of the things also that's also very common among the existentialists is that because they're on their own and because they're kind of figuring it out on their own, life is very daunting, very kind of uncertain because they don't have a lot of help from God. Fyodor Dostoevsky, 19th century Russian existentialist. As I mentioned, his most popular books were Crime and Punishment and the brothers Karamazov. And so he explored key existentialist themes in his writing. Friedrich Nietzsche, okay, he died in 1900. He was a famous German atheist, existentialist, and one of the best-known philosophers in the entire world. He is the guy that said God is dead. He wrote about the Superman. He wrote about the will to power. In fact, I mentioned about that interview that we did this morning, Sissel, with the D'Ambrosios. The title of that movie that the D'Ambrosios are doing is called Triumph of the Heart. Well, that is a takeoff of Triumph of the Will, because Triumph of the Will was a Nazi slogan because the whole Nazi movement was based on a triumph of the will. And even though it's been said that Nietzsche was not a racist, he was not anti-Semitic himself, his sister was. And she was a Nazi, and she took his writings, and she kind of, when you talk about Superman and when you talk about the exaltation of the human being, it's not too much of a stretch to see how somebody like Hitler would have picked up on this. And so Nietzsche, whether he meant it or not, had a huge influence on the Holocaust. And that's what this movie, Triumph of the Will, is about, is, St. Maximilian Kolbe and his treatment in the Auschwitz prison camp by the Nazis. And so there's a real-life connection between existentialism and the atrocities that happened in the 20th century. Speaking of Nazis, the next guy is Martin Heidegger. And he died in 1976. And so this is not an ancient philosopher. This is a guy that, at least coexisted with me. I don't think with Sissel, because no, Sissel was not around in 1976. I can tell you that much. His most famous book. Does anybody know the most famous book that was written by Martin Heidegger? I have picked it up and started reading it probably 10 times. Even in the last week, I picked up this book. One of my dreams of life is to read this book by Martin Heidegger because I'm fascinated. Even though I don't like him personally, I find what he wrote about to be absolutely fascinating. And his book...
Something with time? Is that what it was?
Yeah,
I don't remember. I just remember time, something
being in time.
Oh, being in time. Okay,
so being in time. Being is ontology. Ontology just means the study of existence. And by the way, do you know... You're getting some good answers here, Sissel. Does anybody know who was considered to be the first ontologist? Like the first, and if you get this, you're like exempted from the final exam at the end of the course. Like who was the first guy that started writing about being and existence? And I'll give you a hint. No. Okay, if anybody out there wants to guess this. He was a pre-Socratic, which meant he lived before Christ. I love the pre-Socratics because almost every theme of philosophy that, continues even to this day, the pre-Socratics were already talking about it, okay? Like people like Pythagoras and Heraclitus and Democritus and Zeno and who else? I'm trying to not give away the one that I'm talking about. But the guy who came up with like a focus on being was a guy named once.
Okay, wait. Okay,
going twice.
The only one I was gonna remember from pre-Socratics was Pythagoras, and so I'm gonna just say him. Just throw him out there.
Okay, no one wasn't Pythagoras. It was Parmenides. Okay, so what Parmenides said, and I find this actually quite interesting, is he said that change is an illusion. Okay, all you have is being. And he said there's really no change because it all relates to the present moment. And in some ways, I think he's right. So, for example, okay, so let's. I'm trying to think of some common experience that you and I had. Okay, earlier today, I interviewed Anthony D'Ambrosio and Marcelino D'Ambrosio, and you were there.
Mm-hmm.
So that happened. You experienced it. I experienced it. The D'Ambrosios experienced. Julian was here. He experienced it. So as I bring it back into my mind, it becomes present, right? So even though it was something that happened a couple hours ago, it's present in my mind. And maybe I think about, okay, tonight when I go home, I'm gonna, kiss my wife, and I'm gonna jump on the trampoline with my son, and read him a book. Okay, even though that's future, it's present because I've brought it into my mind in the present. So what Parmenides said is that all that exists is being. And, he would deny like the reality of the past and the present because everything, and really it's the way that God operates, because God is being itself and God is existence. And with God, there's no past or present. So to the degree that we can replicate that in our mind and bring the future and bring the past into the present moment, we're being very much like Parmenides. And that's not to say that the past and the future don't exist. We know they do. But he was the first one to kind of explore that type of ontology or the study of existence itself, which I personally find kind of fascinating, to be honest with you. All right, so like I said, speaking of Nazis, Martin Heidegger, being in time, he did become a Nazi. And one of the very sad things is that his mentor was a guy named Edmund Husserl, who was the chair of the philosophy department where Heidegger, run. And being in time, the preface of it was written by Edward Husserl. Husserl was a Jew, so when Hitler came into power, Husserl was removed from his position, and guess who got his position? Martin Heidegger. And so it's just kind of an irony that Heidegger owed so much to Husserl and then basically ended up pushing him out of his position, taking his position. And because Husserl was at the wrong time and the wrong place in history as a Jew, he was kind of ostracized. And but Heidegger, he became a Nazi. All right, the one on the far right is Jean-Paul Sartre. Jean-Paul Sartre, who, by the way, is the only one of these people who took on the title of existentialist. Like Kierkegaard, I mean, he invented it, but he didn't intend to like. But he didn't say the word. He never said I'm an existentialist, but he talked about existence. He talked about the present existence. Heidegger did not want to be called an existentialist. Nietzsche did not want to be. And it wasn't until Sartre came along that he kind of owned that term. But Sartre was so pessimistic and such a downer. He's the one that said hell is other people. He wrote a book called Nausea. And so he focused on kind of the negative of existence. And he was an atheist. And so there was no hope. It was just you live and you die and, that kind of thing. So I think he kind of ruined existentialism because after that, they're like, I don't think I like that stuff,
That's so funny. I just now remembered because I haven't watched it, but I saw on a streaming platform the other day a TV show called Hell is Other People. And in my head, I was like, that's from something. Where is it from?
That's from Back to the Father.
I was like, I know this. And now I feel like I need to go watch that show and see what it's about.
So it's really interesting. So Jean-Paul Sartre, extremely famous. But I will say that, we're all products of our time. And Sartre died in 1980. He lived, in the time of World War II and the bombing of Japan and, the psyche back then. And some people, watching right now may have lived during that time, like in the 1940s and Nazi Germany, like, you watch Triumph of the Heart, this D'Ambrosio movie, and you come out saying, wow, humanity is really wicked. And you see the way that people were treated. And it can turn you very pessimistic. And so Jean-Paul Sartre lived during this time, and the Vietnam War and World War II and the atomic bombs, and you come out of it thinking like, is there any meaning for existence? And does life just kind of stink? And so, so you start talking about existentialism, and we're just responsible for creating ourselves, and a lot of people kind of caught on to this, and he was an extremely popular philosopher in the 20th century. So, all right, so that's existentialism. We've covered pantheism. We've covered existentialism. We're on our way to infinity, but one more little pit stop on the way there, and that is idealism. Okay. So I've got 5 representatives of idealism, and since Sissel is the only person in my view, do you reckon any eyes in these?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
And anybody out there who's watching, if you want to chime in, I know there's some people out there that are watching this right now, so don't be bashful. If you want to take a guess at this, remember there's. Okay, so 5 people there. Do you right? I know we've talked about all these people.
Oh, I know. The guy on the far right is the most one sticking out to me as recognizing, but in my head, I'm running through names in my head. I'm trying to remember who he is.
Yeah.
Gosh. All the names that I think of are ones we've already said. And so I'm like,
so just throw out a name, and I'll tell you if he's on there. And then in the meantime,
no, he's not on here. Okay, first off, far on the left, idealism. So obviously a very early philosopher.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think who that could be.
That's Plato.
That is Plato. In my head, I was trying to think which of the 3 would be considered idealist.
Yeah, and there's this famous painting, and I think it's called The School of Philosophers. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong about that. Where and I want to get this. I want to put it. You know what I'm talking about? So Plato is pointing up. And as he is in this picture, because he believed in the realm of forms, he also believed in the pre-existence, like everything that we're ever going to learn already exists in our mind. And as we go through life, we're just kind of, recollecting things that are already there. So that's why, and let me read the definition, okay? Various systems of thought in which the objects of knowledge are held to be in some way dependent on the activity of mind. Okay, so idealism means that the world is mind dependent. So it doesn't exist outside of the mind. Now, that's kind of weird too, isn't it? When you think about it, because we in our, because most of us have kind of swim in the fishbowl of Christianity, we're not pantheistic. We don't think God and the world are the same thing. And we're not idealistic in thinking that the world out there only exists because I'm thinking it, okay? So, I mean, truly, an idealist would say that, me and Sissel and all of you who are out there, we only exist because we're in the mind of God, okay? So now there's some truth to that, is that God created us and holds us in existence, as we'll learn in a second, but we do have our own existence apart from God. Okay, we're not just in the mind of God, and I'm trying to explain it in a way that makes sense, and I don't think I'm doing very well. But so Plato had this realm of forms, and that was the real world. It was just like what existed up in this other realm, and the created world didn't matter that much. Okay, so the next guy is George Berkeley. He was an Irish 18th century empiricist philosopher, and his famous quote, okay, so when you see a movie by this title and you say, I've heard that somewhere, okay, his famous quote, George Berkeley, is to be perceived. Okay, and he would have said it like in an Irish brogue because he was an Irish bishop.
I'm not going to try to do
be
that.
Is to be perceived, which means that you only exist if you're perceived. And Berkeley would have gone so far as to say that, the things in my office right now don't exist for me because I can't perceive them. Okay, the only thing that exists is that which is perceived by me. Right?
So if I duck under this table and you can't see me anymore, I don't exist. That would be so easy and convenient, honestly.
No.
Like someone comes to collect rent or something, you're like, I don't exist.
Yeah, I don't exist. Yeah. So that's Berkeley. And then the middle guy, who looks like he's about 10, is actually Immanuel Kant.
That's Kant. What? Okay.
That's a picture. It's a public domain
That's-
picture of Kant. It's the one that I could find, you know?
Yeah, I did not recognize Kant from that one. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
I have a guess for the last guy, but we'll get there.
Oh, okay. You think you figured it out? All right. So Kant, his most famous book was The Critique of Pure Reason. He died in 1804, so he was mostly 18th century. Copernican revolution, the categorical imperative. All right. So he was an idealist. Okay. So the mind constructs reality. All right. So things are mind dependent. So now, like I said, you've got this relationship between the things in the world and either God or the human person, where they only exist because they're in something's mind. All right. The next one, listen to this name, Friedrich Wilhelm Joseph Schelling. Okay.
Wow.
Friedrich Wilhelm Joseph Schelling. And he was a famous German idealist and lived around the same time as the last guy, whose name I'm not going to mention. And so, again, he was a German idealist. Now, you want to try to guess the last one, Sissel?
Okay. This is, I don't know if I'm going to say the name right either, but is it Hegel?
Yeah, it's Hegel, yeah.
Yes.
His official name.
On this one.
Listen, it's Georg Wilhelm, I guess I like this Wilhelm name, Friedrich Hegel. Isn't that interesting? So Schelling was Friedrich Wilhelm Joseph Schelling. Hegel was Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. So they like a lot of names. And so Hegel wrote a book called Phenomenology of Spirit, or Phenomenology of Geist, where basically it was the progression of history where, consciousness reflecting upon itself. And he was a Christian, he was a Lutheran, but he believed that God was kind of evolving through history. Okay, and it's a very strange. I wish I better understood German idealism, because it's really interesting, and I struggle to explain it really well. But you basically have a pantheistic type of idea where everything is mind dependent, and the world and our reason is kind of caught up in God as God progresses to some state of, absolute perfection, and really kind of weird. But again, it all has to do with God and the relationship between God and the human person and the created world. All right. So does that make any sense? I'd really love to get a little bit of feedback, because, Sissel's like, come on, people, because, but does that make sense? Can you kind of understand at least a little bit of the difference between pantheism, existentialism, and idealism? Because we're about to, talk about infinity, and how really from a Christian, perspective, and St. Thomas Aquinas, we can answer these philosophies that we've just talked about there before. So let's move on and get into a little bit of the Summa. And at the beginning of the Summa, St. Thomas Aquinas has, and we've talked about this a lot, what I call the 7 attributes of God. They're questions 3 through 11 in prima pars. It's 9 questions focusing on 7 attributes. And I have often said, I think you ought to try to commit these to memory. And the 7 attributes of God that he talks about is that God is simple, he's perfect, he's good, he's infinite, he's immutable, he's eternal, and he's one. Okay, that doesn't mean those are the only things, because God is also all-knowing, and he's merciful, and he's just, and he's powerful. But the fact is, God just is. So all of these qualities and these attributes are the same in God. There's no distinction between them. The only distinction is that we, because of the limits of our mind, have to describe them differently in order to understand God. But God just is. God is pure act. So we're going to focus on this whole idea of infinity. And Thomas asks in the question in, I guess, okay, so it goes perfection, simplicity, perfection, goodness, and then I think infinity. So this is the 4th of the qualities. And he asks, is God infinite? Okay, whether God is infinite. And if you think about this, it's kind of mind-blowing because we are in a particular place at any given time, and everything else in the world that we see is, either there or here. It's not everywhere. But can you even wrap around the idea of a being who is infinite, which means that he would be every single place at the same time? I mean, can you even imagine that? I mean, it's very, very tough. And this is one of the challenges when we talk about pantheism. And this is where the pantheists get their philosophy, and also where the people like the idealists do, is that the pantheists would say, well, if God is everywhere, you can't, and I see a frog or a flower or a turtle, well, then if God's everywhere, God is there, right? God is the turtle. God is the butterfly. And it kind of makes sense. And this is where somebody like Spinoza would say, well, for simplicity's sake, it's all one. It's all one substance. It's all together. And you can't take something away from God, because then if you do take it away, then God's no longer there. And it's something separate outside of God, and then you can no longer say God is everywhere, right? So that's the challenge, is that how can God be everywhere, but I'm not God? Because if God's everywhere, God's here, and if I'm not God, then that doesn't make sense. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Total sense. I will say, we do have a comment from VL Jury on YouTube saying that I signed up for the Summa class. I'm a little scared now, LOL.
No. Don't be scared, because the thing, that reminds me, and thank you for sharing that. So you are talking about the Jaron Academy, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, let me tell you, VL, that I, for the last 11 years, have taught the Summa to high school kids, okay, every single year. And in the class, it's very interactive, okay? And so it's a lot easier. Like this show, for some reason, even though, we've had a number of people that are watching, and there are people watching right now, for some reason, this people don't like to interact. And when there's interaction and there's questions being asked, like, for example, if you were to say, hey, I didn't quite understand that. And also, VL, in the class, we're not going to be talking about pantheism and idealism and existentialism. It may come up a little bit, but basically we're only talking about the Summa. Okay, on this program, I kind of bring in other things because I try to relate it to other topics. But I have had last year I had a 12-year-old in my class, and her name was Greta, and she just absolutely rocked the class. I mean, she got probably a 99% in the class. She did very well. So don't be intimidated, and it's going to be a lot easier because it's more interactive. It's more asking questions and things like that. So does that ease your mind a little bit? Don't drop the class, okay? Because I promise it'll. But I will say at the same time that I think sometimes younger people who don't have as much life experience, it may be in some ways a little bit easier for them. And I'm not saying that a 12-year-old, listening in on this program right now is going to be like, oh yeah, sure, this is no problem. Philosophy can be tough, and there can be parts of the Summa that can be kind of challenging. But I can tell you that by and large, the high school kids, the middle school kids, the 12-year-olds that take this class do not have a problem with it. Okay, so does that ease your mind a little bit? I hope it does. All right, so let's.
And really quickly, I'm putting the link to the GRN Academy classes for anyone who's interested in our comments.
Oh yeah, okay. Thank you for doing that. I meant to mention that at the beginning, so I'm glad that it was brought up. So God's everywhere, and at the same time, so how do we reconcile that with pantheism and also idealism? Because if like somebody like Hegel just says that everything in the world in history is kind of caught up with God, it kind of makes sense, because if God is everywhere, he also would be in history, right? And as things change and things move along, God is going to be part of that as well. But then God is immutable. God doesn't change. And that's why, man, you got to wrestle with these things. You know, it's like, wow, this is really fascinating. How can God be immutable? How can God be infinite? You know, and how can we kind of argue against some of these other philosophies? All right, so the next one says, can anything but God be essentially infinite? And this is really interesting because he says that there is something that is partially infinite. And do you want to take a guess?
How can something be partially infinite?
Yeah,
How does that work?
Yeah, so infinite would be everywhere, right?
Right.
And what he says is that the reason that, okay, I'm glad you asked that. The reason why you and I are not infinite is because we are a combination of form and matter, right? So you have a form and a matter that comes together to become one thing. So I am in one place at one time, and this pen is in one place at one time because form and matter come together. So then you ask yourself, well, what would be potentially like kind of partially infinite? It would be something that is a creature but doesn't have matter. Okay, so what would that be? Okay, a creature that doesn't have any kind of physical.
Like an angel?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
So it'd be an angel. Okay, so all right. So now VL Dury says, I'm looking forward to it.
Good.
I'm glad I talked you off the cliff there, VL, because no, I promise you, you're gonna like it. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Okay. All right, so yeah, sign up for the class. And there's other classes like Dr. Ray Lopez is doing Aristotle's Ethics. We got a music class with Julie Carrick. We've got Angels and Demons with Debbie and Adam. And Steve Gleason is doing one on apologetics as well. Okay, so now we have this issue where God is infinite, and the only creature that kind of borders on infinite would be the angel. But Thomas also teaches, and this is something, VL, that we will learn in one of our classes this first term, is that angels are in a place. Okay, so an angel is not everywhere at the same time, but how can something that doesn't have a body be in a place? Do you remember this teaching, Sissel?
I remember we definitely talked about it. I'm over here sitting trying to remember like the reasoning. I don't entirely remember because it's saying, because it can't. I know, like I remember when we talk about angels that they can basically think where they want to be and be there.
Yeah, they will it. Okay, so let's say you take your body away.
Okay.
And all you are is a intellect and a will. You're just a mind, okay?
Yep.
But imagine you're still there. You just don't have a body, right? And in that mind, you say, I want to be in Paris, France. And so, boom, you're in Paris, France, okay? Just like that. And you're like, I think I'm going to go home. Boom, you're there. But you didn't have a body that you had to lug around. So by applying your will to a particular location, you just go there. Okay, but you don't have a body. You're just you're just kind of there.
Just kind of floating around,
Kind of floating around. And so that's how an angel kind of moves around, according to St. Thomas Aquinas, by the application of its will to a particular place, which I find to be pretty fascinating. Okay, so moving along here, we go to whether God is in all things. So this is basically Aquinas's answer to pantheism, because pantheism would have existed, back, because Plato, not Plato wasn't a pantheist, he was an idealist, but there were
the idea of it, I'm sure, has been around for a very long time.
Look at when did I say Marcus Aurelius lived? He lived in the 2nd century. Okay, so Thomas Aquinas didn't come along until the 13th century, and so let me just read this to you, and in case you have any, pantheists at your cocktail party this weekend, and you want to say, I think I have an argument against pantheism. Let me just pull this up real quickly and find this. I've got a lot more pages here that, the existence of God in things. Because remember I said if God is everywhere and that bird is flying around or there's that dog there, that's somewhere. If God is everywhere, he's got to be there, so that must be God too. Okay, that's what the pantheists would say. So here's what Aquinas says. He says, God is in all things, not as part of their essence, nor as an accident, but as an agent is present to that upon which it works. For an agent must be joined to that wherein it acts immediately and touch it by its power. So God is everywhere in that he moves everything. He wills everything to exist. And so nothing would exist unless God continued to have it in his mind. And he's moving it in a sense, but he's not in its essence. And so in the Christian philosophy, the thing still exists in itself, and God is not in it in its essence, but he is with it in its power. And so he gives an example here that, let's see if I can see this. He talks about a king being in a kingdom because he's ruling the kingdom, and so he has power over his subjects, and they're subject to him, but he's not like in every single place. So everybody can feel the presence of the king, and the king is able to move the subjects and kind of dictate things. That's one of the examples that St. Thomas Aquinas lives. But you know, the other fascinating things is that all these creatures, like I've got this picture of this iguana here on the screen that I think you can see, and all of these things are existing, but they don't have free will, and nobody really would believe that an iguana is waking up in the morning and saying, well, what am I going to do today? And here's my to-do list. And I think I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And I'm certainly not going to do anything immoral. And I'm, but they're just kind of moving. They're just kind of moving along. And Thomas would call this, teleology, where so it's like he uses the analogy of an arrow being shot to a target. And the arrow is moving towards a target, and it was shot there, but it's not moving itself. It's being moved by something else. And that's the way that Thomas would explain, like in the fifth proof of the existence of God, how all of the irrational creatures in the world work. Okay, why is the tree growing? Why does, something grow to maturity? Why does the sun rise every day? Why does it set? It doesn't have rationality. It doesn't have mind. Why is it moving? Because God's moving it. Because God exists in his power and his essence. He's moving all these things. But then with us, we're different because yes, he's moving us, but we also have free will. So we have the right to kind of disobey God and move in different directions. And that's the difference between us and all the other creatures of the world. All right. So did that make sense? Do you know now how to answer pantheism, how to answer idealism, existentialism? We covered a lot of ground there. Okay. So you can't say you didn't learn something. I mean, come on.
Even if you took one takeaway.
All right. So here's my challenge. I know there's a number of you out there. Let me see. But there's typically more people on YouTube than there are on Facebook. But does anybody have a question? Because we have gone nearly an hour, and for some reason this kind of timed out kind of well. We got 5 minutes left, a couple of questions that you might have about any of this stuff. Do you understand pantheism? Would you be able to explain it to somebody? Or existentialism, idealism? Do you know how it differs and compares to our understanding as Christians of God's relationship with the human person and with creatures? And so we're going to give you a couple of minutes to think of your questions, and I want to challenge one person out there to ask one question, okay? And I don't know who you are, other than if VL is still there. If VL is still there.
There is no question that we do is
that, and I'm going to have Sissel answer the question.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because okay, even like a yes/no question. Does this interest you? Did you find pantheism to be interesting? I mean, if you can you kind of see where pantheists are coming from?
Yeah, no, I mean, I get the idea of it. I think for a lot of them, it is very well intended, and that so I can see it where it's coming from. It just doesn't make sense in the long run, you know?
Yeah, and like a Stoic, I think the reason why Stoicism is appealing to a lot of people is that a Stoic kind of goes with the flow. You know, you don't think of a Stoic as being all kind of like nervous and anxious and wrapped up and like, you know, what the future is going to hold, because the Stoic would be a determinist where they believe that, you know, I don't really have a whole lot to say about this. You know, things are just going to unfold as they're going to unfold. And the only thing that I can do is respond to it, and I can get myself all worked up, or I can just kind of go with the flow. And that's what Spinoza would say, you know, and that's why I think Spinoza was a pretty likable character. People thought he was very nice because it's almost kind of a lazy philosophy, because you don't have free will, you don't have any responsibility for yourself. You're just kind of, it's almost like, if you want to think of it this way, you're kind of like something that's just kind of flowing down a river, and you're part of something, but you don't have any control. You're just kind of moving along, you know? And you can get yourself all tied up in knots about where you're going and what the future is going to hold, or else you can just kind of lay back and say, you know what? I don't have anything to say about this. I'm just kind of going to go with the flow. And that's why Stoics typically are, you know, described as not having a lot of emotions, and they don't get themselves all worked up. Why? Because they're just kind of going with the flow. Right? All right. So I don't think we have
another question. Can I just say something that's been stuck in my mind ever since we talked about, I think, was it Heidegger's book that was Being in Time?
Yes.
Okay. This is really corny, but all I could think about was that if they just he changed one word, it would completely change the meaning of the book, and it would be being on time. It would be like an etiquette book instead. What could have been? He
being on time.
Being on time. Yeah. Sorry, that has been stuck in my head ever since we talked. I was just like, you know,
being on time. That's good.
Being on time.
And it'd be for people, because I think being not on time is like a personality trait. Some people, I'm more of a kind of a punctual guy. I like to be there on time. Now, interestingly, and I'll close you with this, is that Jean-Paul Sartre, who was influenced by Heidegger, his most famous book was called Being and Nothingness. So he took
being
and nothingness. So it was a takeoff of Heidegger's Being in Time, is that Sartre basically, you know, didn't think that things, like there was really nothing really made sense. Okay, so being in nothingness rather than being in time. All right, V.L. Dury, thank you so much. Dropped midway, no problem at all. We're glad that you were with us, and everybody else who is watching. By the way, if you'd like to join our email list, I send out a little reminder the day of. Sometimes I'll send out something midweek and tell you what the topic is going to be. I don't honestly know. Well, next week we're not going to have a program because I'm going down to San Antonio to MC the Phone Us the Truth event. By the way, if you want to go to phoneusthetruth.org. They put on amazing conferences. This one's going to have Matthew Leonard and a bishop from San Antonio, and Gabe Castillo and Dave and Lauren Moore are going to be there. And I'm going to be the MC, so I'm looking forward to it. If you want to go out there, I'd love to see you out there. phoneusthetruth.org. And that is going to do it for Back to the Father today. Thank you very much for joining me. And again, join the email list, backtothefather@grnonline.com. And if you want to sign up for the GRN Academy, grnonline.com/academy. Have a great weekend. God bless you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us for Back to the Father. And don't forget, the glory of God is the human person fully alive. If you have comments about the show, email Dave Palmer at grnonline.com.